Welcome to Outrage Overload, a science podcast about outrage and lowering the temperature. To our longtime listeners, thank you for sticking with us. And to our new listeners, welcome. I'm your host, David Beckemeyer, and today we continue our special series, OK Boomer.
Okay, Boomer.
Express yourself, try something else. Don't take a backseat. You can start living free. It's all in you.
We live in a world that feels like it's always too much. Too much news, too many notifications, too many opinions, and yet we can't look away. In this episode, we're talking about overwhelm, digital overwhelm, and what happens when generations try to make sense of it all together. My guest is Craig Mattson, a professor of communication and the author of Digital Overwhelm, a mid-career guide to coping at work. He studies how people, especially across generations, try to stay human in a world designed to keep us scrolling.
You sort of look at your propensities, and you look at where you waste your time, and you look at what where you're able to help, and then you kind of head down that pathway. And for me, it's always been language stuff. I've always loved language. And I've always loved story. Story. That's the thread that runs through Craig's work, and maybe through this whole conversation. Because when it comes to making sense of the modern world, stories might be the only thing that still stick. Craig's book uses the word overwhelm. On the show, we often talk about overload. A lot of people who write about digital media use water metaphors. We all do. We talk about streaming television, or we talk about being inundated, or we talk about floods or torrents, and we could go on. But the water metaphors are really important because so much of the media that we're engaging, we have to navigate. We can't just receive it. It's not like getting a postcard. It's more like a whole experience. And so for me, I don't much care whether you call it digital overload or digital overwhelm. It's a whole thing.
And that whole thing is exactly what defines modern life, driven by the ruthless engine of the attention economy. It's tempting to blame this overwhelm entirely on social media, the endless scroll, the notifications. The truth is, companies have fought for our attention for a century or more, from the first radio ad to the golden age of television. But the sheer volume and ruthlessness of the competition has increased exponentially. This isn't just about Mark Zuckerberg, it's the entire ecosystem. Traditional media, from cable news to morning shows, is now just as reliant on generating outrage and urgency to keep your eyes locked. It's political campaigns that are less about issues and more about theater, highly targeted, emotionally charged content. The competition for our minds has slipped into every corner of modern life. Older generations experience a gradual introduction to digital life. They develop their focus in a world with built-in scarcity, 3 TV channels, a daily paper, and a phone attached to the wall. Over the last several decades, however, younger generations have been born directly into this all-consuming, high-speed competition. Their baseline for normal is a world where every minute is monetized and every platform is designed to short-circuit attention. The pressure, the anxiety, and the sense of constant overload is not a personal failure, it's a side effect of an economy built on the continuous capture of the human mind. If we take this water metaphor, some of us remember life before the flood. Others were born underwater. During the pandemic, Craig started having conversations with his former students, Millennials and Gen Z professionals trying to build lives in the early 2020s.
During COVID, like so many people, I was like, what do I do with all this time? And I started to just reach out very informally to people who were maybe 5-10 years out of a program of communication study that I was a professor in. And first of all, I was kind of surprised that they were so willing to talk. And secondly, I was stunned by the stories I was hearing. And so I opened a study and did more formal qualitative research, interviewing dozens of Gen Z and millennial professionals. And I didn't always ask exactly the same question. It kind of depended on the conversation, but it was roughly this. The question was, how are you dealing? How are you dealing? How are you coping with the intensities of the early 2020s? Nobody hesitated. Nobody said, "What are you talking about?" Everybody felt overwhelmed. They might describe it in different ways. I eventually decided that it was best described as digital overwhelm, but sometimes they might say professional, or they might say vocational, or they might say communicational. But everybody agreed among the Gen Zs and millennials that I was speaking with that, yeah, we're dealing with a lot of things that feel unprecedented.
And out of that came research for his book and a deeper understanding of what it feels like to be young, ambitious, and exhausted all at once.
The sort of pivotal experience where I felt generational difference the most starkly. As a Gen Xer, I was talking with a millennial, and we were in a coffee shop, and for the first time, I feel kind of dumb saying this because it feels sort of obvious now to me, but for the first time, I heard somebody say, "Yeah, my work, it's meaningless. It has no point." And that was so foreign to me as a Gen Xer. You know, Gen Xers sort of historically understood themselves as being a part of, you know, nonprofit organizations and world-changing organizations. And I know there's also sort of a slacker image for Gen Xers, but there's also like this kind of critical edge of like, we should do this better. And, you know, you put your head down and you just keep at it. And here was someone saying, "Yeah, my job, it doesn't have any meaning." That made me sit back and say, yeah, what is going on? And why do I think my job has meaning? And what's the point? So that at that point, I think the sort of generational chasms that sometimes open up between us really became apparent for me.
For Gen X, work was supposed to be meaningful. For millennials, it was supposed to be world-changing. For Gen Z, it's often just supposed to pay the bills.
I saw a kind of good-natured pragmatism. So most of the Gen Zers I talked to, I think I would say if I were hiring, I wouldn't mind having these people in my organization. I really enjoyed their sense of humor. I enjoyed their style. I enjoyed the ways that they sometimes like definitely exceeded the stereotypical expectations for their generation. But the pragmatism was a real thing. They in a couple of ways, they would communicate things like, maybe I don't see my job as having a lot of point, but I need it. I got to pay the bills. I have to pay off my tuition for one thing.
It's not apathy, it's pragmatism, a quiet realism from people who came of age during recessions, pandemics, and constant crises. Craig studies something he calls modes, the way we approach communication. And sometimes the mode we're using just doesn't match the moment.
A mode is an approach. It's a posture, and sometimes you can carry a mode very lightly, and it's just like, for right now, this is going to be my approach to this. That's going to be my mode. But it can also be a whole orientation. It's just like sort of how you carry yourself, how you understand yourself, how you posture yourself in the world or towards your work in my research. The problem comes in when you get stuck in a mode and it proves to not be shareable with other people or with, people you need to share a mode with. So let's just take the mode of communication that we could just call sending. I'm going to send something. CEOs love this, right? You send out the sort of 900-word manifesto. But managers and honestly, some rising professionals on teams will also make use of this sending mode. They're like, let's get everybody on the same page. I'll just group send this, 1,000-word email and everything will be clear. That mode of sending has a certain strength to it. It allows you to be really clear, like you're hoping, and it allows you to be detailed, and it gives you a chance to edit yourself, and people can digest it asynchronously at a convenient time for them. So those are real gifts of that mode. But let's say that you are just hired in a company and your you have some confusion about your role, and you write to your manager. I heard from at least one professional who said, yeah, my manager doesn't read more than 2 lines of an email. And so if this is your mode to write the really long email and make everything crystal clear, it's probably not going to work. So you're going to need to switch that. And that might mean switching to a conversational mode where you catch them on a phone call or on a Teams dialogue or just in the hallway if you're working in person. So being able to flexibly switch your mode is important.
Craig and I both spend a lot of time thinking about how technology shapes emotion. I told him how digital life gives us the illusion of connection without the commitment. We pick off a menu, to get what we want, and we're expecting, we're always looking for more. And I think this crosses generations, that this digital landscape has given us this idea that we want more clicks, we want more likes, we want more followers, we want more engagement, we want more money, we want more, and because we have this idea that we can just pick the next one, as soon as if we just, wait, the next one's going to pop before us. Next opportunity is going to be there. So I don't tend to commit to the relationships I already have because I'm waiting for that. I'm like looking, I'm not talking to you. I'm looking over your shoulder because there's a better conversation to be had on the other side.
Yeah, honestly, I think I do that a heck of a lot. I think that there's a logic in digital communication that is heavily quantitative, and that it's sort of reductively quantitative. How many subscribers do you have? How many likes did you get? How many reposts and so forth? And I think the sort of quantitative push of that is towards optimization, because what's the story here? Are the numbers going up, or are they stagnant, or are they going down? Like, there aren't a lot of options. Whereas if you're having a conversation in somebody, in a coffee shop with somebody, there's a lot of potential stories there. In fact, you can spend a lot of time afterward processing what happened in that conversation. There's a lot going on there. So I think that push towards the quantitative and towards optimizing the quantitative is a huge factor. You're also asking about emotions, though. That's a really interesting aspect of that for me. The loneliness that sets in with that. Somebody made this clear to me once by saying that they compared digital communication and the connection we feel. It's a real thing. We feel genuine rapport with people digitally. I feel it with you right now. But there's something really kind of desolate when the screen goes blank after the call. And I think some of us felt that during COVID if we were gathering with students or with church groups or with, just friends or family. It's really wonderful in that moment. And then the Zoom call ends and you're just looking at your screen. And so I think there's a loneliness to that. And there's a restlessness to it too. Like, where can I next find that sort of digital high that I experienced just now?
That feeling of looking over someone's shoulder is the social side effect of the attention economy. It's what happens when we're constantly chasing a digital high. That quick hit of novelty and excitement that makes us believe the next swipe will deliver someone more interesting. We're so conditioned to seek out those small, quick dopamine rewards from people who aren't in the room that we fail to commit to the ones who are. But true connection, the kind that builds trust and lasting bonds, requires focusing your full attention on the person right in front of you, not the potential conversation with someone you haven't even met. Later in our talk, Craig brought up something he calls tacit communication, the unspoken stuff, the knowledge we carry that's hard to explain, especially across generations.
One of the modes of communication that I talk about, ironically, is the tacit mode. And the tacit mode is all that stuff we don't say. There's a famous philosopher of science, Michael Polanyi, who developed a theory of what he called tacit knowing. And it's kind of gotten picked up by corporations, and it's sort of been popularized and bowdlerized. But tacit knowing is something that I think is intergenerationally important. Everybody has to know more than they can say in order to do a job. And I think figuring out how to trigger that, not in a bad sense, but like activate, let me say, that tacit knowledge in an organizational community for different kinds of generations is a profound challenge. Trying to figure out how to communicate the tacit to a boomer or to a Z or the rising alpha generation, like those are probably going to be different projects. For a Gen Xer like myself, I'm probably going to want you to talk me through it. And for a Z, I'm certainly not going to want a manual, even if it's really artfully written. I'm going to want a demonstration.
We began with the importance of story. We ended there too.
If you just think about what persuades you and what doesn't persuade you, even when you tell yourself facts, like I should not eat this, I really shouldn't.
Right. Right. Doesn't work on ourselves, right?
You don't listen to yourself. You're not persuaded by that.
No.
So yeah, you do need some kind of narrative to live into in order to be persuaded by something.
Maybe that's what connects the generations, not the apps we use or the slang we don't understand, but the stories we choose to tell about ourselves.
The workplace is a mini democracy, and like it's a good space to try to work out some of our political problems because it's, in a particular way, it's a very limited space. Like everybody knows they're going to go home or they're going to turn off their laptop eventually. And so like it gives us a little bit of like, well, let me try this with this coworker with whom I disagree. Let me at least try. No harm done, we just got to work together. But yeah, also I got to work with this person. So let me like divulge something of how I understand the world here and see if we can't find our way towards some kind of shared posture.
Whether you're a boomer trying to understand your Gen Z coworker or a Gen Z trying to decode your boomer boss, maybe it starts with one small thing. Less sending, more listening. Craig Mattson's book is called Digital Overwhelm. You can find it, ironically enough, online. I'm sure you can also ask your local bookseller, and if they don't have it, I'm sure they can order it for you. I'm David Beckemeyer, and this has been OK Boomer. That is it for this episode of the Outrage Overload podcast. For links to everything we talked about on this episode, go to outrageoverload.net. If something in this episode sparked a thought, or maybe even lit a fire, I'd love to hear from you. You can leave a voice message or even schedule a quick one-on-one chat right from our contact page at outrageoverload.net/contact. If you found this episode valuable, please share it or leave a review. It really helps. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time. Before we go, I want to give a quick shout out to a podcast friend. This isn't an ad, just a friend whose show I think you might enjoy. Here's a short promo.
Hey, welcome to Dad Space. This is a podcast for dads by dads. And if you're a dad, if you know a dad, then we have a space for you. It's called Dad Space. You can find us at dadspace.ca. My name is Dave. I'm excited to have you join us over at dadspace.ca. Thanks for listening.